The soda can slipped from my 12-year-old daughter Emma's fingers and splashed across my nephew Tyler's phone. Before I could even react, the 17-year-old shoved her so hard she stumbled backward into the patio table. "You're worthless," he snarled, then spat directly at her feet. "You're broke, so you don't matter." My brother Derek immediately stepped forward not to defend Emma, but to point his finger at me. "Apologize to my son or get out," he snapped. My parents sat there smiling their approval. I stood up, slowly processing what I'd just witnessed, and made a decision that would change everything. 3 years ago, my life looked completely different than it does today. I was 29, running a small software development company out of a cramped office in downtown Denver, working 16-hour days and living on energy drinks and determination. The breakthrough came when a major telecommunications firm bought my customer management platform for $2.8 million. After taxes and paying off business loans, I walked away with enough money to buy a comfortable house in Lakewood, invest wisely, and never worry about rent again. My brother Derek wasn't so fortunate. At 35, he'd been running a small construction business for 8 years when a workplace accident damaged 3 discs in his lower back. The injury ended his days of physical labor and left him struggling to manage his crew from behind a desk. His marriage to Jennifer fell apart 2 years later, leaving him as the sole guardian of Tyler, who was 14 at the time, and already showing signs of teenage rebellion. Our parents, Frank and Linda, had always made it clear that Derek was their favorite. He was the athlete in high school, the one who stayed local, the one who gave them their first grandchild. When Derek's financial troubles began, they started dropping hints about how fortunate I'd been, how family should help family, how my success meant I had responsibilities to those less blessed. The guilt campaign worked. I offered to help with Tyler's education, figuring a good private school might straighten him out and give him better opportunities than the overcrowded public high school in Derek's neighborhood. $18,000 a year for St. Augustine. Preparatory seemed like a worthwhile investment in my nephew's future. When Tyler needed a car for his part-time job, I agreed to cover the monthly payments of $450 for a reliable Honda Civic. At first, Tyler seemed genuinely grateful. He'd call me every few weeks to update me on his grades, thank me for the opportunities, and promise to make the most of what I was providing. He maintained a solid B average, played on the school's baseball team, and talked about applying to Colorado State University for engineering. But somewhere around his 16th birthday, Tyler's attitude began shifting. The thank you calls became demands for additional money. He needed cleats for baseball, then a laptop for school projects, then funds for a class trip to Washington, D.C. Each request came with the assumption that I'd automatically say yes, as if my bank account existed solely for his benefit. The disrespect toward my wife Sarah started subtly. Tyler would interrupt her when she spoke, dismiss her opinions about college planning, and make snide comments about her teaching salary. When Sarah suggested Tyler get a summer job to learn work ethic, he laughed and said he didn't need to work like regular people because his family took care of him. The final straw came 2 months before the barbecue incident. I'd stopped by Derek's house to drop off Tyler's car insurance payment and found the front door unlocked. Voices carried from Tyler's bedroom upstairs, and I climbed the steps to let them know I was there. Tyler's door was cracked open, and I could hear Derek's voice clearly. "Listen, son, your Uncle Brennan owes this family big time. He got lucky with some computer nonsense while I've been breaking my back doing real work my whole life. That money he gives us isn't charity. It's what he should be contributing anyway. You don't owe him gratitude, you deserve what you're getting." Tyler's response chilled me to the bone. "So I can ask for whatever I want." "Within reason," Derek replied. "Just remember, he's got more money than he knows what to do with, and we're family. He's supposed to take care of us." I backed down the stairs quietly, left the insurance payment on the kitchen counter, and drove home in stunned silence. For 3 years, I'd believed I was helping my nephew build a better future. Instead, I'd been feeding his sense of entitlement, while Derek taught him that success was something to resent rather than aspire to. The realization that my generosity had been twisted into some kind of family obligation burned in my chest for weeks. But I didn't confront Derek immediately. I wanted to see how far this attitude would go, how much Tyler had absorbed his father's poison. The answer came at that family barbecue when my daughter accidentally spilled soda, and Tyler's true character erupted for everyone to see. The silence that followed my decision stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Derek's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage as he realized I wasn't bluffing. Tyler stood frozen beside his father, soda, still dripping from his phone, apparently unable to process the consequences might actually exist for his actions. "You're serious?" Derek finally managed his voice, rising to a pitch I hadn't heard since we were children fighting over toys. "You're going to punish a kid because of an accident?" I kept my voice level and calm. "Tyler shoved my daughter and called her worthless. That wasn't an accident, Derek. And your response was to demand that I apologize to him. The car payments stop next week. I'll contact St. Augustine tomorrow to remove my name from the tuition account." My father Frank stood up from his lawn chair, his face flushed with indignation. "Brennan, you're being ridiculous. Tyler's just a teenager. You can't destroy his future over one mistake." "I'm not destroying anything," I replied. "I'm simply no longer paying for his choices. If Tyler's education and transportation are important to you, you're welcome to handle those expenses yourself." My mother Linda joined the conversation with tears already forming in her eyes, a manipulation tactic she'd perfected over decades of family drama. "How can you be so selfish? We raised you better than this." Family helps family no matter what. Sarah appeared at my side, her hand slipping into mine with quiet support. Emma stood behind her, still shaken from Tyler's attack, but watching everything with the sharp intelligence that made me proud to be her father. My girls understood what my parents and brother apparently couldn't grasp. Tyler finally found his voice, and it came out as a whine that reminded me how much growing up he still needed to do. "Uncle Brennan, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean what I said. Please don't take away my car and school. I'll lose everything." "You should have thought about that before you put your hands on my daughter," I said simply. "Actions have consequences, Tyler. It's time you learned that lesson." Derek stepped closer, his chest puffed out in a display of aggression that might have intimidated me when we were kids. "You think you're better than us? Because you got lucky with some computer program? You think your money makes you superior?" "I think my money is mine to spend as I choose," I answered. "And I choose not to spend it on someone who teaches his son that wealth equals worthlessness and that physical intimidation is acceptable." The next 3 days brought a parade of phone calls that Sarah and I stopped answering after the first dozen. Derek called repeatedly, alternating between rage and pleading. My parents tried guilt, disappointment, and threats to cut me out of family events. Extended family members who rarely contacted me suddenly had strong opinions about my obligations to Tyler's education. My Aunt Patricia, Derek's godmother, left a voicemail that perfectly captured the family's twisted logic. "Brennan, honey, I can't believe you're being so petty. That boy depends on you. And now you're yanking away his stability because he acted like a normal teenager. Your brother is struggling, and instead of being compassionate, you're making everything worse. This isn't the Christian thing to do." Sarah and I listened to that message together while Emma practiced piano in the next room. When it ended, Sarah shook her head with disgust. "Notice how nobody mentioned what Tyler actually did. It's all about what you're supposedly doing wrong." She was right. In 3 days of family outrage, not one person had acknowledged that Tyler shoved Emma or called her worthless. The narrative had already shifted to make me the villain for withdrawing financial support. as if my money was somehow Tyler's birthright rather than my choice to give. Derek's final call of that week carried a different tone, darker and more threatening than his previous attempts at manipulation. "You've embarrassed our family, Brennan. You've made me look like a failure in front of everyone we know. I won't forget this, and I promise you'll regret making an enemy of your own brother." When I hung up, Sarah looked concerned. "What do you think he meant by that?" I wasn't sure, but Derek had always been vindictive when he didn't get his way. Growing up, he'd broken my toys when Mom and Dad punished him, spread rumors about me at school, when I outperformed him academically, and once convinced our parents I'd stolen money from Dad's wallet when Derek needed cash for a date. Whatever Derek was planning, I knew it wouldn't be subtle or mature. But I also knew I'd made the right choice. Tyler needed to learn that actions had consequences. Derek needed to take responsibility for his son's behavior, and my family needed to understand that my generosity came with the expectation of basic respect and decency. The war was just beginning, but I was ready for whatever came next. The coordinated assault on my decision began exactly 1 week after the barbecue incident. It started with my cousin Rachel calling during my lunch break, her voice heavy with manufactured concern that fooled no one. "Brennan, I've been thinking about this situation with Tyler, and I really feel like you're overreacting. Derek called me last night, and he's absolutely devastated. He's worked so hard to give that boy opportunities, and now you're pulling the rug out from under them over a little sibling squabble." I set down my sandwich and prepared for what I knew was coming. Rachel Tyler physically shoved my 12-year-old daughter and told her she was worthless because we don't have as much money as he thinks we should. That's not a sibling squabble. But you have to understand the pressure Derek's under. She continued, clearly reading from some kind of script. "He's raising Tyler alone. His business is struggling, and he's doing his best. Maybe Tyler was just having a bad day." The calls continued throughout the week. My Uncle Robert phoned Wednesday evening to lecture me about family loyalty. My cousin Mark texted repeatedly about how Tyler was basically a good kid who'd made one little mistake. My Aunt Susan showed up at Sarah's elementary school to ambush her during lunch duty, demanding that she convince me to reconsider. Derek had clearly orchestrated this campaign, providing everyone with the same talking points. Tyler was fundamentally good. Derek was struggling, I was overreacting, and family should forgive and forget. What none of them mentioned was the complete lack of accountability from either Derek or Tyler. The manipulation reached a new level when Derek started invoking our deceased grandfather's memory. Grandpa Joe had been the family patriarch, a World War II veteran, who'd built a successful plumbing business and preached the importance of family unity until his death 5 years earlier. "Grandpa Joe would be ashamed of you," Derek declared during one of his voicemails. "He believed family came first no matter what. He'd be heartbroken to see you abandoning Tyler over something so trivial. You're dishonoring his memory and everything he taught us about loyalty." That particular accusation stung because Grandpa Joe had been important to me. He'd encouraged my interest in computers when everyone else called it a waste of time, helped me with my first business plan, and celebrated my success without resentment. But I also remembered his advice about enabling versus helping, about how real love sometimes required tough choices. Derek's most disgusting manipulation involved Tyler himself. 3 weeks after the barbecue, Tyler appeared at my front door on a Tuesday evening, his eyes red with tears, and his voice shaking with practiced emotion. "Uncle Brennan, please, I'm begging you. I know I messed up, but I've learned my lesson. I'll lose everything if you don't help us. St. Augustine already sent a letter saying I'll be withdrawn if the tuition isn't paid by Friday. My friends will all think I'm a loser, and I'll have to go to Jefferson High with all the kids who don't care about their futures." Emma watched from the stairs as Tyler continued his performance, his desperation seeming genuine enough that for a moment I questioned my resolve. Then Sarah appeared beside me, her expression hardening, as she recognized the manipulation for what it was. Tyler, she said calmly, have you apologized to Emma for shoving her and calling her worthless? Tyler's tears dried up immediately, replaced by the same entitled irritation I'd seen at the barbecue. That was just an accident. I already said I was sorry. No. Emma spoke up from the stairs, her young voice clear and strong. You never said you were sorry. You just said you didn't mean it when Dad told you there would be consequences. The mask slipped completely then, and Tyler's true character showed through. Whatever. This whole thing is stupid anyway. You people are making a big deal out of nothing. I closed the door in his face. The final escalation came when Derek appeared at my office the following Thursday. My assistant Jessica buzzed me to say there was an angry man in the lobby, demanding to see me, claiming to be my brother. When I walked out to meet him, Derek was pacing near the reception desk, his voice loud enough that several of my employees had stopped working to watch the spectacle. There he is, Derek announced as I appeared. The successful brother who destroys children's lives because they hurt his feelings. Tell everyone here how you're ruining Tyler's education because he accidentally bumped into your precious daughter. Jessica looked mortified. My project manager Kevin appeared concerned, and I felt my professional reputation taking damage in real time. Derek had calculated this humiliation perfectly, knowing I'd never make a scene in front of my team. Derek, we need to take this outside, I said quietly. No, I think your colleagues should know what kind of man they work for, Derek shot back. They should know you'll destroy a kid's future over nothing, that you'll abandon family when they need you most. I walked over to Derek, spoke in a voice only he could hear, and said, You have 30 seconds to leave my office before I call security and have you escorted out by police. After that, you'll never be welcome here again. Derek left, but not before shouting back, This isn't over, Brennan. You've made the biggest mistake of your life. That evening, Sarah and I sat on our back deck while Emma did homework inside. The stress of the constant pressure was wearing on all of us, but Sarah's support never wavered. They're never going to stop, she said quietly. Derek's turned this into a war, and your parents are backing him completely. She was right. What had started as a reasonable consequence for unacceptable behavior had become a family civil war with battle lines clearly drawn. Derek and my parents on one side, Sarah and Emma and me on the other, and everyone else choosing sides based on whatever version of events they'd been fed. But I was beginning to suspect there was more to Derek's desperation than wounded pride or genuine concern for Tyler's future. His reaction was too extreme, too coordinated, too focused on getting my monthly payments restored immediately. Something else was driving this campaign, something Derek didn't want anyone to discover. I was about to find out what that something was. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My former college roommate Jake worked as a project manager for Morrison Construction, one of the larger firms in the Denver metro area. We'd stayed in touch over the years, grabbing beers every few months to catch up on life and business. During one of these casual conversations, I mentioned Derek's financial struggles and work limitations following his back injury. Jake's reaction surprised me. Derek Sullivan, your brother Derek Mann. I've been trying to land his crew for subcontract work for 2 years. He's got one of the most successful small operations in Jefferson County. His guys do beautiful work, and he charges premium rates because everybody knows Sullivan Construction delivers quality. The disconnect between Jake's description and the struggling single father Derek portrayed to our family gnawed at me for days. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored, and the inconsistencies became impossible to overlook. Derek drove a 2-year-old Ford F-150 King Ranch Edition that retailed for over $60,000. Tyler's work car, that I wasn't paying for, was actually a lifted Chevy Silverado with custom wheels and a sound system that probably cost more than most people's entire vehicles. Derek's house, which he claimed was mortgaged to the breaking point, sat on a double lot in one of Arvada's nicer neighborhoods. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chen a former police detective who specialized in financial backgrounds for divorce and business cases. What Marcus uncovered over the following week shattered everything I thought I knew about Derek's situation. Derek owned 3 rental properties in addition to his primary residence. 2 were single-family homes in Westminster that generated $1,800 monthly rent each. The third was a duplex in Thornton, bringing in $2,600 combined. The total rental income exceeded $5,000 monthly, more than most families' entire household earnings. Sullivan Construction's business license and tax filings told an even more revealing story. Derek's company had grossed $480,000 the previous year and was on track to exceed $600,000 in the current year. His back injury had forced him out of physical labor, but it had pushed him into project management and business development, where his experience and connections made him extremely successful. The most shocking discovery came when Marcus traced Derek's banking activity. Derek maintained 3 separate accounts at different financial institutions, a common practice for people trying to hide assets or income. The account Derek used for obvious expenses like mortgage and utilities showed modest activity that supported his struggling father narrative. The other 2 accounts told a completely different story. Regular deposits from construction projects, rental income, and cash payments painted the picture of a man who was financially thriving. But equally regular withdrawals revealed where Derek's money was actually going. Every Tuesday and Friday, Derek withdrew between $500 and $1,500 in cash from ATMs near 3 different locations: Blackhawk Casino Central City and an underground poker room in a Westminster warehouse district. Derek wasn't struggling to support Tyler. He was struggling to support a gambling addiction that was consuming his income faster than he could earn it. The monthly payments I'd been making for Tyler's school and car weren't going toward Tyler's expenses at all. They were freeing up Derek's legitimate income to feed his addiction, while maintaining the appearance of financial responsibility. Marcus provided documented proof that Derek had paid Tyler's tuition directly to St. Augustine Preparatory for the entire current school year. He'd also purchased Tyler's Silverado with cash 4 months earlier. My payments had been pure profit for Derek, money he could gamble away without affecting Tyler's actual needs. The investigation revealed one more crucial detail that explained Derek's desperation to restore my financial support. According to Marcus's sources in the underground gambling community, Derek owed $47,000 to a group that operated poker games in warehouse locations around Denver. These weren't friendly neighborhood games. They were run by people who expected payment on time and had unpleasant ways of collecting overdue debts. Derek needed my monthly payments to service this debt while keeping his gambling habit hidden from family and maintaining his image as a devoted single father, doing his best under difficult circumstances. When I cut off his funding, Derek faced the choice between confessing his addiction or finding another way to generate the cash he needed to stay current with dangerous creditors. That explained the coordinated family pressure campaign, the desperate manipulation tactics, and Derek's increasingly threatening behavior. It wasn't about Tyler's future or family loyalty. It was about Derek's gambling debts and his willingness to sacrifice everyone else's relationships to protect his secret. But Derek had made one critical mistake in his elaborate deception. He'd underestimated Tyler's intelligence and his capacity for moral reasoning when presented with the truth. Tyler might have been spoiled and entitled, but he wasn't inherently evil. He'd been manipulated by his father just as thoroughly as Derek had manipulated everyone else. The question now was whether Tyler would choose to continue being Derek's unwitting accomplice, or whether he'd find the courage to stand up for what was right. I was about to find out which kind of man my 17-year-old nephew really was, underneath all the entitlement Derek had taught him. The truth changes everything, but only if people are willing to face it. Derek had built his house of lies carefully, but like all deceptions, it was only as strong as its weakest link. Tyler was about to become that weak link, and Derek's entire world was about to come crashing down. I spent 3 sleepless nights deciding how to handle Marcus's revelations. Part of me wanted to confront Derek immediately, to throw the evidence in his face and demand explanations for 3 years of calculated deception. But that approach would only give him time to construct new lies, manipulate Tyler further, and potentially disappear with whatever money he could access quickly. Instead, I chose patience and strategy. If Derek wanted to play games with family loyalty and emotional manipulation, I'd show him what real planning looked like. The upcoming Sullivan family reunion scheduled for the second Saturday in July at the Westminster Community Center would provide the perfect stage for Derek's public reckoning. Sarah understood my reasoning immediately when I explained the plan. "He's been using Tyler as a shield and the family as weapons," she said. "It's only fair that Tyler and the family see exactly who Derek really is when all the masks come off." My first step was documenting everything Marcus had uncovered with additional verification. I contacted St. Augustine Preparatory, directly identifying myself as Tyler's uncle, who'd been contributing to his tuition payments. The business office confirmed that Derek had indeed paid Tyler's full tuition for the current year in advance, submitting a cashier's check for $18,000 in August. The car dealership that sold Tyler his Silverado provided similar confirmation. Derek had purchased the truck with $28,000, cash adding custom wheels and sound system for another $6,000. The transaction occurred 2 weeks before Derek called me crying about Tyler needing reliable transportation for his part-time job. I also reached out to 2 of Derek's rental property tenants posing as a potential buyer interested in investment properties in their neighborhoods. Both confirmed they'd been renting from Derek for over 3 years, praising him as a responsive landlord who maintained the properties well and never raised their rent unnecessarily. The gambling debts proved more challenging to verify directly, but Marcus had cultivated relationships with people in that community during his police career. His source confirmed that Derek was known as Sully in the underground poker scene, that he'd been playing regularly for 18 months, and that his luck had turned sharply negative in recent months. The $47,000 debt was accurate, and the people he owed were growing impatient with his payment schedule. While I gathered evidence, Derek continued his pressure campaign with increasing desperation. He enlisted new family members weekly, apparently working through our entire extended family tree to find anyone willing to call me selfish or heartless. My second cousin, Amy, who I'd seen maybe 5 times in my adult life, left a voicemail about how disappointed our grandmother would be in my behavior. Derek's direct approaches became more creative and pathetic. He started showing up at places where he knew I'd be attempting ambush conversations that always ended with him demanding immediate restoration of Tyler's funding. He appeared at my gym, my grocery store, and even Emma's softball game, always with the same script about Tyler's ruined future and my obligation as the successful family member. The breakthrough I'd been hoping for came on a Thursday evening when Tyler appeared at my door again. But this time, his tears seemed genuine, and his desperation had a different quality. Instead of demanding I reinstate his funding, he asked if we could talk privately. We sat in my home office while Sarah and Emma watched television in the living room. Tyler's hands shook slightly as he spoke, and his voice carried none of the entitled whining that had characterized previous conversations. "Uncle Brennan, I need to tell you something, but I'm scared of what will happen if my dad finds out I talked to you." The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours and revealed the extent of Derek's manipulation. Tyler had begun questioning his father's version of events after several family members mentioned details that didn't match what Derek had told him. When Tyler asked direct questions about our family's finances and Derek's business situation, Derek became defensive and eventually threatening. "Dad told me that if I didn't go along with getting you to pay for stuff, he'd lose the house and we'd both end up homeless," Tyler explained. "He said your computer company was basically stolen money that you owed our family for all the help Grandpa Joe gave you when you were starting out. He made it sound like you were selfish for keeping money that should be shared." Tyler's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But then, I started doing math. Dad bought me this truck with cash. He just paid for new kitchen cabinets with cash, and our rent from the other houses comes to like $5,000 a month. We're not poor, are we? I showed Tyler the evidence Marcus had gathered, watching his face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally heartbreak as he realized how thoroughly his father had used him. The gambling debts hit him hardest. So when he said the money you were giving us was for my school and car, he was actually using it to gamble. That's exactly what happened, I confirmed. Your real expenses were already covered. My money was just freeing up his income for poker games. Tyler broke down completely, then sobbing with the kind of raw emotion that comes from discovering your entire world was built on lies. But when his tears stopped, his expression hardened with a resolve that reminded me of our grandfather. I want to help you expose him, Tyler said firmly. At the family reunion, in front of everyone. He used me to hurt Emma and manipulate you, and I can't live with that. The alliance I'd hoped for was forming, but I needed Tyler to understand the consequences of standing against his father. Derek's reaction would be explosive, and Tyler might face years of conflict and manipulation in response. Are you sure you're ready for this? I asked. Derek won't forgive you for taking my side, and he'll probably try to turn other family members against you, too? Tyler nodded without hesitation. Emma's just a kid, and I hurt her because Dad filled my head with garbage about money and family. I have to make that right whatever it costs me. The reunion was now just 9 days away. Derek expected to use that gathering to pressure me into capitulating through sheer family momentum, with everyone watching to see if I'd restore Tyler's funding and apologize for my unreasonable behavior. Instead, Derek was going to face the consequences of 3 years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, he was going to face them without Tyler as his shield. The Westminster Community Center buzzed with 3 generations of Sullivan family members as Sarah, Emma, and I arrived at the reunion. Folding tables covered with checkered tablecloths held enough casseroles and desserts to feed a small army, while children ran between the adults and teenagers clustered near the sound system arguing over music choices. Derek had clearly prepared for this moment. He worked the room like a politician, stopping at each family group to share his version of recent events and build support for the confrontation he was planning. I watched him embrace elderly relatives while whispering in their ears, pat younger cousins on the shoulder while gesturing toward me, and comfort my parents, who nodded sympathetically at whatever story he was telling. Tyler stood beside his father, but I noticed the tension in his posture and the way he avoided making eye contact with anyone. He'd spent the previous week wrestling with the decision to expose Derek's lies, and the stress was showing. Several relatives commented on how thin and tired he looked, which Derek immediately attributed to the emotional trauma of losing his educational support. The formal confrontation began after everyone had eaten and gathered for the traditional family meeting, where we discussed upcoming birthdays, anniversaries, and any family business that needed addressing. My father, Frank, stood at the front of the room and cleared his throat for attention. Before we get to the regular business, there's a family matter that needs to be resolved. He announced, his voice carrying the authority that made him an effective factory supervisor for 30 years. As most of you know, Brennan has decided to cut off financial support for Tyler's education and transportation over a minor disagreement. We need to address this situation as a family. The room fell silent except for the whispered conversations of small children who didn't understand the tension. Derek stepped forward, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey wounded dignity mixed with concern for his son's future. I didn't want to make this public. Derek began, his voice heavy with manufactured sadness. But Tyler's future is too important to let pride get in the way. 3 weeks ago at a family barbecue, Tyler accidentally spilled something and bumped into Brennan's daughter. Instead of handling it like adults, Brennan decided to punish Tyler by destroying his education and taking away his transportation. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd as Derek continued his performance. I'm a single father doing everything I can to give my son opportunities I never had. My back injury limited my work options, and my business has been struggling since the divorce. Brennan's help with Tyler's private school and car payments made the difference between Tyler having a future and having nothing. Derek's voice cracked with practiced emotion. I've begged him to reconsider, explained how much Tyler depends on this support, but Brennan refuses to budge. He's willing to destroy a 17-year-old boy's life over an accident that lasted 5 seconds. The family's reaction was exactly what Derek had orchestrated. Aunt Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Uncle Robert shook his head with disgust. Cousin Rachel crossed her arms and glared at me with open hostility. Even relatives who barely knew the details looked disappointed in my supposed heartlessness. My mother Linda stepped forward to add her voice to Derek's cause. We raised our sons to support each other, to put family first no matter what. I never thought I'd see the day when one of my children would abandon his nephew over something so trivial. Brennan has lost sight of what family means. The pressure in the room built as more relatives spoke in Derek's favor. They painted me as the successful brother who'd forgotten his roots, the lucky one who refused to help the less fortunate, the man who'd let money corrupt his family values. Derek nodded sadly at each condemnation, occasionally wiping his eyes and placing protective hands on Tyler's shoulders. When the family had finished expressing their disappointment, Frank looked at me expectantly. Brennan, do you have anything to say in your defense? Any reason why you won't help your nephew get the education he deserves? I stood slowly, pulling the folder of evidence from my bag and walking to the front of the room. The documents Marcus had compiled were organized chronologically and backed up with photographs, bank records, and witness statements. Derek's confident expression flickered with the first hint of concern as he realized I'd brought more than apologies. I have quite a bit to say. I began, my voice calm and measured. But first, I want everyone to hear the truth about what actually happened at that barbecue. Tyler didn't accidentally bump into Emma. He shoved her hard enough that she stumbled into a table. He didn't spill something on her. She accidentally spilled soda on his phone. His response was to call her worthless and tell her that being broke meant she didn't matter. I opened the folder and removed the first set of documents. But more importantly, I want everyone to understand exactly who they've been defending and what Derek has really been doing with the money I've been providing. Derek's face went pale as I held up bank records showing his rental property income. Derek owns 3 rental properties that generate over $5,000 monthly. His construction business grossed $480,000 last year and is projected to exceed $600,000 this year. He paid Tyler's tuition in full with cash in August and bought Tyler a $28,000 truck with cash in September. The room erupted in confused murmurs as family members tried to process information that directly contradicted everything Derek had told them. Derek himself looked like a man watching his execution, his confident mask replaced by panic as he realized his lies were unraveling in front of everyone he'd manipulated. The money I was sending Derek each month wasn't going toward Tyler's expenses. I continued removing more evidence. It was funding Derek's gambling addiction. He owes $47,000 to underground poker games and has been using my payments to service that debt while maintaining his image as a struggling single father. Uncle Robert stood up, his face flushed with anger. That's impossible. Derek told us his business was failing, that he could barely make ends meet. Tyler chose that moment to find his courage. He stepped away from his father and walked to where I stood at the front of the room, his young voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Uncle Brennan is telling the truth? Tyler announced, his hands trembling but his voice steady. Dad lied to all of you, and he lied to me. He told me Uncle Brennan was selfish and owed our family money. He made me believe that being mean to Emma was okay, because we deserved what we were getting. But we were never struggling. Dad was gambling away money and using Uncle Brennan's payments to cover his debts. Derek's composure shattered completely. "Tyler, you don't know what you're talking about. These people are manipulating you, filling your head with lies to turn you against your own father." The final blow came when the community center's rear doors opened and three men in dark suits entered the gathering. Derek recognized them immediately, his face going white, as he understood that his two worlds were about to collide in the most devastating way possible. Marcus had arranged for Derek's gambling creditors to appear at the reunion not to collect money or make threats, but simply to confirm Derek's debt to anyone who still doubted the evidence. The lead man approached Derek with a businesslike demeanor that made the entire room uncomfortable. "Mr. Sullivan, we need to discuss your outstanding balance. You've missed 3 payment deadlines, and we're running out of patience." The family watched in horrified silence as Derek's secret life materialized before their eyes. His reputation, his carefully constructed image, his manipulation of family loyalty, everything collapsed in the space of 5 minutes as the truth overwhelmed his ability to lie his way out of consequences. Derek's final humiliation came when he tried to salvage something from the wreckage by attacking me personally. "You planned this," he screamed, his voice breaking with desperation. "You manipulated everyone just to destroy me, all because I asked you to apologize for your daughter's clumsiness." Tyler stepped between his father and me, his teenage voice carrying more authority than Derek's adult tantrum. "Dad, stop. Please just stop lying. Emma didn't do anything wrong, and Uncle Brennan didn't destroy anything. You destroyed it yourself." The reunion ended with Derek being escorted from the building by his creditors, while family members sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that they'd been manipulated into attacking an innocent man. The tables had turned completely, but the satisfaction I felt was tempered by sadness for the relationships Derek had damaged and the trust he'd betrayed. Tyler chose to ride home with my parents rather than Derek, and I knew my nephew's real education was just beginning. 3 months after the reunion confrontation, I sat in a coffee shop near Colorado State University, watching Tyler nervous fidget with his admissions packet. He'd driven himself to our meeting in the same Honda Civic. I'd originally helped him purchase the Silverado, having been sold to help Derek pay down his gambling debts. The change in my nephew was remarkable. Tyler had lost 20 pounds since the reunion, but it was healthy weight that came from working 40 hours a week at a landscaping job while maintaining his grades at Jefferson High School. His entitled attitude had been replaced by genuine humility and a work ethic that impressed everyone who knew him. Most importantly, he'd learned to take responsibility for his actions without making excuses or blaming others. "I still can't believe I got the partial scholarship," Tyler said, reviewing his acceptance letter for the dozenth time. $2,000 might not sound like much to most people, but I earned every penny of it. The scholarship was merit-based, awarded to students who demonstrated academic excellence, combined with community service. Tyler had spent his summer volunteering at a youth center in his neighborhood, teaching younger kids basic construction skills he'd learned from Derek before gambling consumed his father's priorities. His essay about overcoming family dysfunction and learning personal accountability had impressed the selection committee. Derek's story had taken a more complicated path toward redemption. The confrontation at the reunion forced him into a crisis that ultimately saved his life. Facing $47,000 in gambling debt, public humiliation, and the loss of Tyler's respect, Derek finally admitted he needed professional help. The rehabilitation process wasn't smooth or quick. Derek spent 60 days in an inpatient gambling addiction treatment program, followed by 6 months of intensive outpatient therapy. He attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week and submitted to financial monitoring that prevented him from accessing cash without accountability. His business license was temporarily suspended while he reorganized his finances and made restitution to clients who'd been affected by his addiction. Most difficult for Derek was rebuilding his relationship with Tyler, who'd moved in with our parents during Derek's treatment. The process required brutal honesty about years of manipulation, dozens of family therapy sessions, and Derek's complete acceptance that Tyler had every right to be angry and distrustful. Tyler moved back in with his father only after Derek had been sober from gambling for 8 months and demonstrated consistent honesty in all their interactions. "Dad's different now," Tyler explained during our coffee shop conversation. "He's not the same person who taught me that money made people superior or inferior. He's actually proud that I'm working and paying my own way instead of depending on family handouts." The extended family had undergone their own reckoning following the reunion revelations. Derek's manipulation had exposed how quickly they'd turned against me based on incomplete information and emotional appeals. One by one, aunts, uncles, and cousins reached out to apologize for their harsh words and unfair judgments. Uncle Robert's apology was particularly meaningful because it came with insight about family dynamics that helped everyone understand how Derek's manipulation had been so effective. "We wanted to believe Derek was the victim because it made us feel better about not helping him ourselves," Robert admitted. "It was easier to blame you for being selfish than to admit we'd ignored obvious warning signs about Derek's behavior. My parents' transformation was the most significant change in our family structure." Frank and Linda had always favored Derek making excuses for his mistakes while expecting perfection from me. The reunion confrontation forced them to confront decades of unconscious bias and its consequences for both their sons. Family therapy sessions revealed that Derek had learned to manipulate our parents' guilt by positioning himself as the struggling son who needed constant support while portraying me as the fortunate one who owed the family assistance. Frank and Linda had enabled Derek's irresponsibility while taking my success for granted, never considering how their favoritism affected family relationships. "We failed both of you," Linda admitted during one particularly emotional therapy session. "We taught Derek that he could avoid consequences by playing the victim, and we taught you that love was conditional on success and generosity. Neither lesson was fair or healthy." The most rewarding aspect of the family's healing process was watching Emma process these adult complexities with remarkable wisdom for her 12 years. She'd forgiven Tyler completely once he apologized sincerely and demonstrated genuine change. But she'd also learned valuable lessons about standing up for herself and recognizing manipulation when adults tried to minimize her experiences. "Tyler was mean to me because his dad taught him mean things," Emma explained to Sarah one evening. "But now Tyler knows better, so he's not mean anymore. People can change if they want to change." Sarah and I often marveled at how this crisis had ultimately strengthened our marriage and family relationships. The stress of Derek's pressure campaign had tested our unity, but our shared commitment to protecting Emma and maintaining our values had brought us closer together. We'd learned to trust our judgment even when everyone else disagreed, and we'd discovered the importance of setting boundaries with people who demanded unconditional support, regardless of their behavior. My relationship with Tyler flourished once the manipulation and entitlement were removed from our interactions. He called me monthly to share updates about schoolwork and his plans for college. But more importantly, he'd become a positive influence on Emma, showing her that teenagers could be responsible and kind, rather than selfish and demanding. "Uncle Brennan," Tyler said, as we prepared to leave the coffee shop, "I want to thank you again for cutting off my funding when you did. I know that sounds weird, but if you hadn't forced me to face consequences, I'd probably still be an entitled brat who thought the world owed me success. Learning to work for what I want has made everything more meaningful." I looked at this young man who'd grown so much in just a few months and felt proud of the courage he'd shown in choosing truth over comfort. "Tyler, the most important thing you've learned isn't about work or money. You've learned that character matters more than circumstances, that how you treat people defines who you are, and that real strength comes from taking responsibility for your mistakes." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the profound life lesson this entire experience had taught our family. Love isn't about enabling destructive behavior or avoiding difficult conversations. Real love sometimes requires saying no, setting boundaries, and allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. When we protect people from the results of their actions, we rob them of the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop the character they need to succeed in life. Derek's gambling addiction might never have been addressed if I'd continued funding his deception. Tyler's entitlement would have grown worse without consequences for his disrespectful behavior. Our family's dysfunction would have continued festering beneath the surface if the reunion confrontation hadn't forced everyone to face uncomfortable truths. Most importantly, Emma learned that her worth isn't determined by other people's opinions or circumstances, that adults should protect children rather than sacrifice them for convenience, and that standing up for what's right sometimes requires courage, even when you're outnumbered. The greatest gift we can give the people we love is the expectation that they can handle responsibility, overcome challenges, and become the best versions of themselves. Sometimes that means withdrawing support to force growth. Sometimes it means having difficult conversations that create temporary conflict. And sometimes it means refusing to enable behavior that prevents people from reaching their potential. Tyler's success at Colorado State University, Derek's recovery from gambling addiction, and our family's restored relationships all grew from that moment when I chose consequences over comfort and boundaries over enabling. The decision that seemed harsh and unforgiving at the time became the foundation for genuine healing and positive change. True family support means loving people enough to help them become better, even when that process is difficult for everyone involved. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to make someone's life easier in ways that ultimately make them weaker. Growth requires challenge. Character requires testing. And real strength develops only when people learn to handle difficulties rather than having others shield them from consequences. I've shared this story because I know many families face similar dynamics where manipulation disguises itself as need, where guilt replaces accountability, and where enabling masquerades as love. If you found yourself constantly giving to someone who never seems to grow or improve, if you've been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, or if you've watched someone manipulate family relationships to avoid responsibility, remember that real change often requires the courage to let people face the results of their choices. What experiences have you had with family members who demanded support while refusing accountability? Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to withdraw help in order to force someone toward responsibility? How do you balance compassion with consequences when dealing with people you love who are making destructive choices? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the difference between enabling and empowering the people we care about. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them handle their own life and learn from their own mistakes.